Hey everybody, good morning. Thanks for joining me out here under this big old tree that is providing a tremendous amount of shade and coolness and really vital tree energy. I'm feeling it, feels good. Today's weekly guidance is more of a reflection and more of a meditation to sort of focus on and to be aware of over the next week. But what really wants to be offered up today is this week reflect on and just try to track any time you feel yourself being pulled into what I would call polarity or divided mind. A while ago, it came through really strong in a channeling that I was doing for myself about a divided mind sees division and that a unified mind sees unity in all things. So it's really like, what kind of lens are we looking at the world with? So if we've dropped our lens on the ground, our camera lens, and it's cracked and it's split maybe into halves or quarters or something like that, well, every picture we take or every time we point it out at something, we're going to see those fissures and those divisions, and we're going to say, oh gosh, everything is so separate, everything is so divided. Even though it looks like it's closed, there's these lines here, everything's divided. Maybe that's a simple analogy. Whereas if we got a clean lens, it's been well cared for and well maintained, we get to see the whole picture without those fissures and without those lines. And really the only difference is that what we're pointing the lens at, what we're pointing the camera at outside of us, is the lens in between, right? So the fissures and the splits and the cracks are in the lens itself. It's not in the picture. So if I'm out here looking at this really beautiful landscape, I've got, you know, the green of the weeds that have kind of sprung up in this natural grass, and I've got the trees, and I've got the blue of the sky and the clouds. And if I put a cracked lens up there, I'm going to see all these cracks. And I'll look out through the lens and I'll say, oh geez, like all these cracks. And I might even say, oh, well, look at this line that divides the white cloud from the blue. There must be something there. It's not the same thing, or it's not connected. But if I put a different lens on there and it's not cracked and it's not beat up at all, then I see the entirety of the picture all together as it is, you know? Maybe that's an oversimplified analogy. But what I'm getting at is this week, can we be aware of where we've dropped the lens, where we've cracked the lens a little bit, and where we see any kind of fissures or divisions where there really, truly aren't any? Can we think about or be aware of when our mind or our emotions are compelled to be pulled into polarization or duality or picking a side and not necessarily being open to the idea or the potential that, well, maybe there's no difference, there's no separation at all. Maybe there's something here that's unified or universal. Maybe there's a part of me in what I'm looking at being reflected back at me. So this week's guidance is just about awareness, just having awareness of that. Have awareness of when you feel pulled into what I would call pulled into divided mind or divided thinking, where you see things as black or white, this or that, left or right, blue or red, good or bad. And just be aware of when those come in. You don't have to do anything with it. Don't try to fix it or anything. It's just be aware of it and see how often that comes up. And if we can become aware of it in ourselves this week, and we want to get ambitious, we can start to look and say, outside of us, see outside of us when that starts to come in. You know, when do we see other people? Just observe. Again, don't try to tell them they're doing anything right or wrong, or fix it for them, or give them a lecture about whether their lenses got cracks in it or not. Just observe it and see if you can pick up on when someone maybe is coming from a perspective or a point of view that is of divided mind. So this week is just about having awareness about when divided mind crops up in us, and then if we want to take it a step further, we can observe and see when do we feel like it's coming up in others, and just be aware of that and just observe it. And what we'll hold space for, what I'll hold space for, and what you can hold space for, is to return to some sort of a unified consciousness or a unified mind when that comes up. So if there's any action step that you want to take, we could do that, right? Is when we feel that cropping up and we say, it's this or that, blue or red, this team versus that team, and we see that separation and the division happening, these polarities, the polarization happening. We look at, okay, well, what part of us is dividing this up? Why are we dividing this up? And is there anything that unifies these things? Is there any kind of a unified truth? You know, there's an old native proverb. It says the left wing and the right wing belong to the same bird, you know? So can we see the bird for the bird? And not just the left wing or the right wing, but can we see the whole thing? That would be unified consciousness. That would be seeing the picture with that lens that isn't cracked. And sometimes it's not even about changing the lens. Sometimes it's about stop looking through the camera and see what's in front of us, right? So let's remove anything that obstructs, that divides us between a direct perception or a direct experience of something. I just discovered that right now. I had my own little revelation during the analogy. So just think about this week. Think about this week. Think about whether or not we're dealing with a cracked lens that is sort of artificially dividing things that are in front of us that are actually belong to one unified whole. And just be aware of when that comes up. And then also maybe be aware of, do I need to look through a lens at all? Any particular lens? Can I actually just be with what's right in front of me in its wholeness, in the totality of what it is, without labeling it or naming it or defining it or divide, and especially not dividing it, but can it just be what it is? What's there for us if we just allow the direct experience that's right in front of us? Is there something there for us? I said I wasn't going to ramble too much, but I couldn't help but kind of get off on a tangent as I chased this inspiration that came in this morning. So let me know what you think. Where do you see division popping up? Where do you find yourself maybe giving attention to or falling prey to divided mind? I can tell you where it's been for me for sure in the past is, you know, I have a history of political activism, and it's not to say that there's not righteous causes that we advocate for, and that there's not times when we have to assert human dignity in the face of oppressive forces. That's a thing for sure. But even in the face of that, can we find that thing, that little glue that holds it all together, without chopping it up and dividing it into individual or antagonistic pieces? And that's always been a big one for me, is sort of socially and politically. How do I remain in that space where I just see it all as one living, breathing being, the constructive and the destructive parts of it, you know? Even by calling it constructive and destructive, I've given it a polarity. See? That's the fun of this. So that's an example I can offer up that I'm always sort of grappling with. So, you know, where do you grapple with divided mind? And if you have ideas or thoughts or reflections, what helps you remain in unified mind? What helps you remain in unified consciousness? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. And let me know how this reflection goes for the week. Let's hold some space for unity consciousness. But our guidance this week is just to be aware. Be aware of where divided mind pops up and maybe what's driving that. We'll see. Thanks so much for joining me today. This little meditative reflection. I hope it serves you this week. And I'll be curious to see how this serves, this message and this little reflection serves us next week, because I'm sure it's going somewhere. So let's see where it goes. Thanks for being here. Adios.